In Wellington, we've got the Chief Executive of the Fire Service, Murray Cummings, and Derek Best from the Firefighters Union. Good evening, both of you.
Good evening.
Murray Cummings, a damning report of the Fire Service, is it not?
Well, it's most unfortunate because this was a premature draft report that was released long before the inquiry was in fact finished, and it shouldn't have been released, and that's acknowledged by the OSH authorities.
So it is not a damning report?
Well, it is a damning report because it doesn't give us the chance to answer.
But it's a damning report, and you find a particularly galling report because you didn't get a chance to answer. Nevertheless, you don't dispute what it alleges.
Oh, yes, we do, absolutely. And we don't think that we will know what the true situation is until the result of an expert examination of that vehicle and the police inquiry is complete.
What about the hinges on the door, though, Murray? Do you dispute they were faulty? You knew they were faulty, says the report, because you were replacing them. The fire service was replacing the hinges on the door as and when they broke on those fire truck doors. In this case, they broke, the doors came off, and the men were thrown out.
Well, that's not correct, of course. That vehicle, unfortunately for the people in it, rolled several times and the cab was deformed, and that would cause the doors to open. I don't believe that there is any evidence at the moment that it had anything at all to do with the hinges. We have various kinds of hinges, and some we have bronze and others we have stainless steel. No instruction has ever been issued because there's been no history of these hinges failing. Sometimes they are replaced as they reach the end of their useful life, but there has been no history of failure.
Were you replacing those other hinges, the hinges that were on the truck that day, because they were unsafe?
No.
Derek Best, the men were thrown out. Derek, in discussing this, I mean no disrespect to the men who have been injured in this accident, but it's become a big issue. Derek, the men were thrown out because they weren't wearing seatbelts. They are required to, by the fire service, by their employer, to wear seatbelts. Now, how can management be blamed for that?
Well, firstly, it's not a big issue at all. It's a very minor issue. It's been fully investigated. The inspector has recommended no action to be taken. I understand the police report from the police in Taupo has been completed. They're not recommending any prosecution of the individuals. So they've looked into the circumstances, the actual facts, and they find no cause to prosecute. However, management have a responsibility more than just to sit behind a desk and issue an instruction some time ago. It's got to be actively followed up, and what this report says is there was ongoing systemic failure in so many different ways, so many things went wrong, and at the end of the day we have managers, they're paid big money, their job is to manage, they must take the can.
What I'm saying to you, Derek, it's easy to blame management and systemic failure, but what I'm saying to you, go back to the seatbelts, please. Derek, if the men had been wearing their seatbelts, they might not have been thrown out when the doors came off. Do you accept that?
I accept the injuries may have been less. The accident still would have happened.
Yes,
and all of the problems with the accident still would have happened.
That may well be so, but if
yes.
the men had been wearing seatbelts, they're required to do so. How can you blame management for this particular aspect?
I don't blame management. What I'm telling you is that a Labour Department inspector has recommended that is an area where the workers concerned ought not to be prosecuted. And there's far more serious things in this report than that particular aspect.
Let's get on to hours of work. Let's get on to hours of work. The report says it is impossible, they use the word, impossible to say if hours worked contributed to the accident. Now, you say today the report vindicates the union's concerns about the hours firefighters are working. How does it?
Well, the report recommends that the fire service be prosecuted because they have required their staff in Taupo to work excessively long hours. That's their words. We've had a lot of concerns. If you have a staff establishment required in Taupo of 18 and you've only got 11 people working there, our people are under tremendous pressure, moral blackmail. If they hadn't turned up to do the work, there would have been no professional fire service in Taupo. They knew the problems that they were facing. Firefighters know the risks that they undertake all the time.
All right, better let Murray Cummings answer that.
Well, I'm glad I have the opportunity to answer that because Derek Best knows only too well that we offered to put in extra staff to Taupo to relieve their problems with being under strength, and both he and the local union declined it because they wanted to keep the overtime up. The other issue in relation to the hours, our own investigation shows that these particular crew members over the last 6 months had averaged between 48 and 62 hours actually at work during that time, and not the 100 hours that we don't know where the investigator got that figure from, but it's just not correct.
And again, Derek, to go back to the report, on the day of the accident itself, 4 firefighters in that cab, 3 of the 4, Derek, according to the OSH report, had been on duty 2 hours. 3 of the 4, including the driver, Derek, the accident happened at 10 o'clock in the morning. 3 of them had only been at work 2 hours.
Oh, absolutely. They started at 8 o'clock that morning.
So where's the evidence of long hours and the stress of long hours?
Hang on a minute, Paul. I'm not prosecuting. The inspector has recommended prosecution. Your questions are good. Go in the witness box when the prosecution happens and answer them. If the fire service believe they are not guilty, there's only one person who's going to tell them they're not guilty, and that's the judge. Not me, not you. Go to court, argue the case. Let's hear the case be argued. What's wrong with that?
Derek,
I'd like to add to that, Paul, that
Just
the one
quickly,
member
Murray, if
of
you
the
would.
crew who, in fact, had been on duty for 16 hours, started work at 8 o'clock the previous night. There were no calls between 8 o'clock that night and 6 the following morning, so he could have slept undisturbed if he had wished.
Maury, if the truth were to be told, I'll ask you both this, really. If the truth were to be told, is there a bit of fault on both sides here?
Well, I don't believe that we're at fault in any way in anything that's been shown to date. Naturally, I am here because I'm most concerned that our volunteers and paid firefighters know that we place their safety at the greatest possible premium. And I'm very upset about this really tragic accident, and I want to make sure it doesn't happen again. And that can only be done if there's a really thorough and complete inquiry before decisions are made.
Fault on both sides, Derek?
Look, I'm sure the 4 guys in that fire appliance can think of things they should have done differently. That's always the case in a dangerous occupation. Firefighters are very, very lucky people. They have so many close calls. But this report says that regardless of those minor matters, there are major problems with the employer. They're not interested in health and safety. They never have been. They still aren't. They're trying to duck and dive and twist and turn right now and not accept their responsibility. Simple as that.
That's just not
Derek
true.
Best of the
because
Firefighters Union. No, it's not true, Murray. I know you think it's not true, but I've run out of time, and I thank you both, Murray Cummings, the Fire Chief, and Derek Best of the Firefighters Union. Have a good weekend, both of you.
Thank you.
Union Secretary Derek Best joins me now. Good afternoon, Derek.
Good afternoon.
This has been going on for a long, long time. Why is it?
Well, it has been going on for a long time, and I think our members, firefighters, have showed extraordinary patience, really. 2 years without a contract, 5, 6 years without a wage increase. We've really come to the end of the line of just trying to negotiate. The action proposed won't affect the public.
What are you proposing?
Well, one of the funny things about our new fire service, which is supposed to deliver a better service, is our members now spend a lot of time filling out bits of paper. The corporate paper trail is endless. I guess it's necessary to keep the bureaucrats in employment. Our members have said we'll still go to fires, we'll still inspect buildings, we'll still do programs with school kids, but we won't fill out the paperwork afterwards. We'll stop the corporate paper trail, and that, in fact, we believe will actually give us more time to get out there in the community and to preach the fire safety message.
Any likelihood of you stopping attending fires, stopping going out to schools at this stage?
No, absolutely no possibility at this stage, but we are concerned that our employer seems to want to stop us doing that, because they have given us an indication that if a firefighter refuses to fill out a bit of paper, there's every chance he might be suspended and sent home. Now, a firefighter suspended and sent home isn't available to be able to actually respond to those 111 calls and to go out to school. So maybe the ball's in the employer's court there if they want to see a fire service continue or not.
This could be potentially very serious then, because, I mean, are all the firefighters behind you here? They're not going to fill out these bits of paper?
Well, we've obviously followed the proper procedures. We're an emergency service. We've given 14 days notice. Certainly firefighters believe it's very minimal action.
But not if they're suspended and sent home, is it?
Well, of course, the ball's not in our court as far as that's concerned. It's in the employer's court. And we've only been told these things. I suspect as some sort of a threat. It does seem hard to believe that a firefighter refusing to fill in the chit that says they just filled the fire truck up with petrol is going to be sent home, and that community won't have a fire service as a consequence. It's a massive game of bluff, really, by an employer, and we'll see what happens. But our people certainly want to keep on delivering the service that they've done in the past.
Derek Best, thanks very much.
Thanks.
Inspecting the troops. This is the Community Safety Team, a new look for the fire service. And the 237 fresh faces are part of the formula.
We're replacing people whose average age on retirement is 54 with people of an average age of 28. So we're going to have a younger and naturally fitter fire service as a result.
They say they're refocusing. Gone are the days of just quenching blazes. Prevention is the buzzword. The trainees are also learning paramedic skills and how to take the fire safety message to the public. For one of only 8 women on the team, it's an exciting career move.
Water on, #1 delivery! I've been in the Sumner Volunteer Fire Brigade for about 3.5 years now. and I really enjoy it, and I've always wanted to be a permanent, so when these positions came up, I just jumped at it.
Jumped right into what union leaders say will be a cut-price fire force. After their referendum last year protesting fire service cuts, they're currently taking industrial action to get a better pay deal for existing staff.
Unfortunately, we've got a group of people who have been used as an innocent pawns, really, in an industrial conflict. The employer has not been able to get firefighters to agree to substandard conditions, so they've recruited straight off the street.
Well, they're certainly not pawns. What these are the new. People who will be in the new profession of emergency management in New Zealand, performing a much wider role than we have done in the past.
But the contract squabbles are far from the minds of recruits like Nikki.
There's a lot of conflict going on, but basically I'm here to do a job, and I'm going to do it whether there's conflict going on around us or not.
Instructors will keep them on the go for the next 13 weeks. Then they'll be assigned for duty in fire stations throughout the country. Jane Jennings, One Network News.
Midnight at Christchurch Central, and the station's new recruits are heading home, leaving one of their 2 pumps out of action. They're part of the fire service's new regime, working longer hours for less pay than their regular firefighting colleagues.
They feel obliged to do the night shifts because they know as well as we know that they're leaving the Christchurch understaffed with firefighters when they go off at night. But the fact of the matter is that they get paid half wages when they work these night shifts, and the hours are just too long for them to work.
Under their contracts, the community safety teams are expected to volunteer to sleep at the station 3 nights a week after their shift ends. But the union says that means some are at work for more than 90 hours a week. Fire bosses accept that's a problem.
Our preference is that appliance is manned. The fact that we can manage to meet our standards without that appliance is little comfort in reality.
In Christchurch, managing involves bringing in appliances from suburban stations to make up the numbers.
The union said today that management only has itself to blame for expecting new recruits to work long hours for what it claims is unreasonable pay. John Selwood, One Network News.
The leaked letter claims the wheels are coming off the fire service.
When you put the whole package together, we believe it's pretty powerful evidence of the crisis that the fire service is in.
The confidential letter was written 2 months ago by the then head of the fire service, Ken Comber, and sent to Internal Affairs Minister Jack Elder. Mr Comber resigned soon after. In his letter, Mr Comber warned that appliance and fire stations are run down, training of volunteers is inadequate, and communication systems are about to collapse. And the union claims budget cuts are putting lives at risk.
There are more and more fires now that firefighters are getting to later and later.
The union says the crisis is avoidable, but says funding rules mean $60 million in fire levies are sitting in the bank and can't be touched.
There is millions and millions of dollars around that the public have paid for a fire service, which the fire service can't spend.
The government says the fire service can live within budget, but at the same time the fire service is being reviewed.
We have a new commission in place who are going to review all the strategies that the fire service use, their own strategic direction and what sort of service they need to provide.
The Minister says the review will take 6 months. Emma Hart, One Network News.
3 elderly women died as a result of this rest home fire earlier this year. 4 people were injured. The fire service says it hasn't been preventing these sorts of tragedies.
We're not convinced that we're doing a good enough job yet in dealing with the risk of fire.
The service says it'll be returning to its main job, fighting fires. To help do that, it will close its national and 3 regional offices, staff were told this afternoon. It says that'll affect about 200 people, although it's not yet clear how many will lose their jobs. Frontline firefighters won't be included. At the moment, Fire Commission executives say less than a third of the business the service does is fighting fires. It's also involved in preparing for civil defence emergencies and assisting at medical incidents before ambulance staff arrive. The Chief Executive of the Fire Commission is resigning as the changes take place.
I wouldn't say so much in protest. What's happened is that the Commission is taking a very, very different direction to the one that the previous Commission and I had taken.
Let's hope that we're on the right track now, but really what the public want to see is more firefighters out there delivering better and more efficient services.
The Fire Service Commission says it has to talk further with fire service staff before deciding what other changes will be made, but it expects its restructuring plan to be finalised by the end of next month. David Jameson, One Network News.
The Fire Service says it wants to focus on fighting fires. Now it's set up what it's calling a new simplified management and support structure to do that.
I believe that we're making a real focus, for example, on multiple fatality fires, which the Commission simply does not accept as an acceptable outcome.
There are to be 8 fire regions. The current national office is to be disestablished. 103 office workers and managers will lose their jobs. The new head office will consist of a chief executive, a national commander and a rural fire officer.
Obviously that money's very desperately needed for the frontline firefighters, and we're still waiting to see some of that come down to the people who are on the fire appliances.
The changes were signalled last month. Within days, the chief executive and the national commander resigned, saying they hadn't been consulted. 2 regional managers followed. The 4 together received a total payout of nearly $800,000. Labor says they shouldn't be rewarded to the extent of $200,000 each for what at first appeared to be resignations on a point of principle. There's to be an inquiry.
Well, as far as I know, the State Services Commission did not check out the main contract concerned, and that's of considerable concern.
With the restructuring in the name of cost efficiency, the 4 managers are now being asked to return the money. Lee Pearson, One Network News.
For many years, the advice has been get out and stay out. But now the fire service says in some cases, people may be able to save their homes and property by putting out the fires themselves.
If people can take some steps to mitigate the damage, I think they should do that. But again, the primary factor is safety, personal safety, and I think if you're an adult, you should be able to use that judgment.
The Firefighters Union says with 70% of people dying in fires through smoke inhalation, it's lethal advice.
It's very, very hard to qualify what's a small fire and what's a big one. From a member of the public's point of view, it takes many years of training and a lot of experience at fires to determine exactly what is what.
The Fire Service says the Firefighters Union has misinterpreted the message. He says the priorities are to get everyone out and call the fire department.
Never go back into a building that is smoke logged, because that could be fatal.
The Firefighters Union believes the public is being softened up to expect less and less from firefighters. And they're warning, if the fire is so bad you've had to evacuate, don't go back inside. Emma Hart, One Network News. In 3.5 minutes, 3-year-old twins dead. The Fire Service Commission says they can't save lives anymore.
The problem we have is that with our present arrangements, we simply can't deliver what is expected of us.
News today of sweeping changes. All 1,600 professional firefighters will be asked to reapply for their jobs for fewer available positions.
The results we're getting are not proportional to the size of our workforce. We're going to have a better skilled workforce because the problem of dealing with fire requires skill sets that we don't currently have. And the new fire officer jobs that we will be inviting staff to apply for, and also volunteers, and as well as the community at large, will be paid about 30% higher.
It's not known how many jobs will be lost, but Mr Estill says the number of firefighters on fire trucks will be reduced from 4 to 3.
We don't need to have that many firefighters on trucks. It isn't making a difference.
Firefighters are devastated. They were only told of the plans an hour before the announcement.
It's really the destruction of the fire service, the last nail in the coffin. People will not get the same services they had before. There will not be the same number of appliances responding to fires.
And this now has brought it to its lowest stage. I didn't think it'd go any lower than morale that it has been, but it is very, very bad.
$1.5 million a year will be spent on education and research, with promises of new fire stations and fire trucks. The government says the changes are necessary and will mean more lives and homes are saved. Emma Hart, One Network News.
Now, with us from Wellington, we have the Chairman of the Fire Service Commission, Roger Estill, who made the announcements today. Then we go camera 2. I've got them, the Wellington Central Fire Station, some of the men on the old contract with Union Leader Derek Best, and at Mount Wellington in Auckland, Martin Berryman and his colleagues who are on the new contract. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The purpose of all this today, briefly if you can, Roger Estill, being what?
The principal purpose, Paul, is so we can do something about the number of fires that are occurring, the deaths that continue to occur from fire, and the amount of property loss. Fundamentally, what we're doing is modernising the fire service. We'll be doing different sorts of work. We're going to reposition and change a lot of our old fire stations that are in the wrong place. Our objective in respect of that is to reduce the amount of time it will take to get a fire engine to the fire.
All right, let's go through some of the ways you want to improve things. You say the public have got to start owning some fire management. That is in terms of prevention?
Yes, very much. We see that, in a sense, we need a compact with the community. We'll do our bit. We'll be ready to respond when there is a fire. We'll provide a lot of education and assistance so that the population understand the nature of fire risk and what they can do about it. But, for example, if we don't get called until the fire is already big, what we can actually do to help is very limited. So we're saying the community is part of your problem, part of ours. We don't own the fire problem. You need to help.
Fires are different now. They burn faster, you say?
Yes, they certainly do, and principally that's a result of the introduction of plastics, polyurethane, the recent fatal fires we had, extraordinarily fast fire development. Perhaps 1 or 2 minutes after the fire started was probably when the deaths occurred. In one of the fires just before Christmas, our crews got there in 2 minutes 49 seconds. The twins who died at Easter, we got there in 3 minutes 36 seconds. That is not the solution, turning up in a fire truck to save lives.
You also point out, I think, today that fire stations need to be better located. They're located in anachronistic places. They need to change.
Yes, in many cases that's right, mostly because of the old borough boundaries, and so we plan to change those as quickly as possible, perhaps over 1.5 years.
Fire engines have got too big.
Yes, some of the fire engines are too big. A big part of our fleet is too old. A lot of it's not properly maintained. Basically, Paul, we've been wasting our money on some parts of what we do. And so we're going to rebalance the fire service, and so that across the whole span of things, we're going to do things better.
Just very quickly, is this cost cutting?
No, not at all. In fact, it's been interesting. I've been constantly accused of cutting costs. This year I actually persuaded the Minister to approve a budget which is $9.5 million more than last year.
And how many men are going to be rehired?
Well,
how many people are going to lose their jobs?
Yes, we don't know the number yet, Paul, because what will happen is that when people apply for the new jobs, it will depend on the district chiefs and the regional managers as to how they crew various stations. They're going to have the option of basically a 3-person crew or a 4-person crew.
Either way, they'll have the flexibility, Roger.
They'll have the flexibility.
All right, let me go to the Wellington Central Fire Station. Derek Best, you see, I've got to say to you, Derek, you're the union leader, I know, but all of that sounds eminently sensible, but you're calling it the last nail in the coffin of the fire service. It doesn't sound like it, Derek.
Oh, well, we're listening to the PR hype and the motherhood and apple pie statements, Paul. I mean, some of it's good. Yeah, there are some problems at the present time, mostly caused by the savage cuts in firefighter numbers over the last few years and the cut in the budget. And Roger Estill still hasn't got the budget up to what it was in 1990, so we certainly are talking about cuts.
What he's saying, though, Derek, I think, is that cuts in firefighter numbers might not necessarily be causing more fires, or might not necessarily lessen the amount of protection New Zealanders have got. That you might be able...
Look, we've got to have a bit of honesty here, Paul. If your house catches fire right now, there is a legal minimum. The fire service must get 2 fire trucks there, and each of those trucks have to have 4 people on them. The legal minimum now is 1 appliance with 3 people on it. Now, I can tell you, and these guys here will tell you, that if they turn up and there's only 3 on their crew and there's no one else coming, they won't be able to go inside and save you. They won't be able to go inside and save the kids that are in there. There are over 800 people rescued from fires last year. That will not be able to happen. And that's the truth of the matter, and it's about time some honesty was really put on what this is not modernisation. It's taking us back to levels pre-World War II.
Derek, is it also time there was some honesty about the firefighters' contract? I mean, the world's moved on. It's reasonable, isn't it, to assume fires have changed, that the ways of dealing with fires have changed, that employment conditions have changed from the days it was acceptable to hire firefighters 2 night shifts, 2 day shifts, then 4 days off, Derek. Isn't that what it's about?
Well, we can't get our employer to come to the table right now. We know that the current roster is the most internationally effective. It's a very effective roster. Firefighters have had an 8-year wage freeze. How much more are you earning now, Paul, than what you were 8 years ago?
It's got nothing to do with it, Derek. We're talking about a reorganisation of the fire service today. What about the fellas next to you? Do you have a comment to make about this?
The thing I'd like to say, Paul, is the fact that Roger Estill's missing the point as usual. Myself and guys like me, we save people's lives in this country. He's been telling the New Zealand public that we don't. We've been doing it for years. The statistics are there. He just doesn't use them, okay? I really feel that the way he's taken the fire service is a black day for the New Zealand public, for everyone concerned with the New Zealand fire service. He will cause the deaths of people in New Zealand and people like him.
Yeah, but isn't it also true that a lot of firefighters, the paid firefighters, there's an awful lot of downtime. Nobody blames you for that because you've simply got to be there and to be able to respond when the fires happen. But isn't it true a lot of businesses are being run from there? You're running businesses, you might even be hiring people from the fire stations. I mean, that's going on. Well,
well, there's a lot of worry elements, but it's not illegal in this country to have 2 jobs or 3 jobs, as quite a few people do. Look, we've offered in the past to improve productivity, so-called, to the levels that are acceptable. The employer doesn't want to talk about it. This is not about productivity increases. As you say, it's about sacking 1,550 people and employing them on lesser conditions of employment as well.
30%, hang on, Derek, 30% pay is slightly better conditions of employment, isn't it?
No, the 30% pay increase, if that's what occurs, requires you to work, for a start, 30% more hours.
56 hours a week.
You haven't had a wage increase for 8 years. You've got to work compulsory overtime on top of that. The offer is actually a cut in the real wages of firefighters.
All right,
now,
let me, Derek, can I interrupt you there? No, Derek, let me move on. I want to bring in Martin Berryman. Martin, you're at the Mount Wellington Fire Station in Auckland. You people, the 4 of you there standing, we can see you are employed as community fire officers, aren't you? So you're on the new contract. Mr. Best and his colleagues there are on the old contract.
Yes.
You're a man of 28 years firefighting experience. Is what Derek Best says right, that this is the last nail in the coffin, that no longer will we be protected?
I think, Paul, really the thing to be looked at is the fact that we have to move on, and the fact that we can't sit around the fire station and just wait for calls. We've got to move out into the community, which this group of staff have been doing, and talk to people and educate them.
Is it effective, Martin, doing this?
Well, the things that we've been finding is that when we've gone back to different groups and spoken to them, we're finding that the information that we've passed on has actually sunk in. And so we're finding that the community is actually approaching us for information that we've already passed on, and they want to go further.
Martin, the volunteer fire brigades today are saying this restructuring is wonderful, it's about time. Do you agree with them?
Was that the volunteers, did you say?
Well, the fire brigades, that's the volunteers, isn't it?
Yes. I haven't heard that comment at this stage.
Well, that's what they're saying.
Okay.
The president of the United Fire Brigades says it's about time.
Okay, the main thing that I see is that what it's going to do is bring a cohesiveness between all the staff, and we're all going to be basically single-minded. That's how I see it, and we're going to get on with the job of getting out there and reducing this this loss of life. I think something graphic has to be done.
But Martin, yes or no, is this the last nail in the coffin of the fire services, Derek Best?
No, I don't believe that, no.
You see, Derek?
Well, look, we represent a lot of community safety team members.
He represents 28 years of fighting fires, Derek.
Yeah, well, people in the fire service know Mr. Berryman and know why he's on the program tonight. It's interesting that the fires that Roger Estill talk about, where we never got there in time to save it, are all those responded to by Mr. Berryman's station. So he hasn't actually done a very good job at educating his community, and of course that exposes the myth of this argument that somehow or other, with glossy PR publications and adverts on TV, we can stop the number of fires. We won't. But what it does mean is those fires that Mr. Berryman and his team responded to where people were killed, legally in the future there'll only be one appliance there, and that appliance will only have 3 people on it. Now you tell me that that's an improvement in the service. I don't believe it. Let's cut to the real issues that are around here.
I'm just a member of the public, Derek, and I'm asking. Roger Estill, this very quick comment from you. Response to what you've heard tonight.
I think the important thing, Paul, is that our criticism is not of firefighters. They've done what we've asked them to do. The problem has been our problem. We've been using the resources the wrong way. We're going to use them the right way, and we are determined. We're going to get the numbers down, but we cannot do that if we just carry on doing the same old thing. We've been wasting resources. It's not acceptable. We're going to improve. And I would make this point, Paul, that while I understand the fire officers who have spoken from the basis of experience, the National Commander of the Fire Service who's approved these changes is a firefighter and a senior fire officer of 30 years. Our regional commanders, between them, have literally hundreds of years. This is not just a silly flash in the pan. This is soundly based.
Chairman of the Fire Service, Roger Estill, I thank all of you very much indeed for your time and for your comments. Next on the programme, the landlord,
This morning, the union is threatening legal action to stop the move. To find out more, we're joined now by Fire Commission Chairman Roger Estill and Union Leader Derek Best. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Mr Estill, is this an exercise in union busting?
It certainly isn't. We recognise that any person may join a trade union in New Zealand. We have no difficulty with that. We're working with our staff's bargaining agent. Any comparison with what's been happening in Australia is just a nonsense.
They are making those comparisons. Trevor Mallard, this morning's paper, Labour MP of course. This makes Patrick Stevedores look like a model employer and he would like to sack you for your stupidity.
Oh, well, I hope Mr Mallard will take the chance to read what we've been saying about the problem of fire, why we're doing it, and the many changes and improvements that we're making.
All right, Derek Best, you were angry yesterday because, of course, you couldn't get them round the table. They really took you by surprise, didn't they?
Well, I guess you could look at it that way. Nothing really does surprise us, but I think the extent of the cuts, the extent of the turn back the clock, the extent of the irresponsibility that this plan demonstrates did take us by surprise. I mean, we've been flooded by calls overnight from very senior people in the fire service, calls from overseas firefighters, calls from volunteers, all pledging their support to try and save what is left of the fire service, because if we only have 3 people on a fire appliance and you've only got one fire appliance turns up to your house when it catches fire, then you're in a lot of trouble.
Isn't the point, though, you don't get to my house in time to put the fire out? The last few deaths we've seen, you are nowhere near. The children are dead in 2 or 3 minutes.
No, that's absolutely untrue, and this is a very vicious myth that's been perpetrated. There were over 800 people last year rescued from house fires. Every death is a tragedy, but for every one death, there are 20 or 30 people who are rescued out of burning buildings.
And are you telling me if you've got 3 blokes on the engine and not 4, you're not going to get in there and rescue me?
Well, it's not only that. You've only got one appliance, so you've actually got 3 people rather than 8 people as the legal minimum, and we know in the fire service the legal minimums become the maximum very quickly. 3 people in a fire appliance cannot go into a burning building. The other concern, though, is if you read the proposals, absolutely no mention of all of the other work that the fire service do. How do you deal with a motor vehicle accident with 3 people? Hazardous substance incidents, the slips that have happened up in Dargaville the other day.
Let me put this to Roger Estill. How do you deal with these things with 3 people, Mr Estill?
I think it's very important that Derek reads information that we've provided him. And yesterday, for example, he was provided with information that said quite categorically that we will, in towns where we have 1 fire engine, which is a lot of towns in New Zealand, there will be 4 people on those crews. In the cities, there will be a mix of stations. Some will have 4 because of local environments or factors, and some will have 3. We will always send sufficient fire engines to the fire that there's always at least 4 people there. So it'll either be because there's 2 lots of 3, a 3 and a 4, 2 4s, whatever that might be. And Derek knows this. We've said it yesterday, and I wish that he would not keep saying this.
Derek Best?
Well, I guess he would wish we'd stop saying it. I guess he'd wish we'd stop saying a lot of things. We're telling the truth. I've got no faith at all, and firefighters have got absolutely no faith in any assurances that somehow or other we're going to have some better service. The legal minimum, 1 fire appliance with 3 people on it, that's what will happen.
Why do you need legal minimums? Why can't the boss of the station think this is a small fire or a big fire and send whatever is necessary? Why do you need a law on it?
You've got to have pre-planning. Fires happen very quickly, as you've just indicated.
Indeed.
If you don't have pre-planning, if things are not there at the push of a button, then they simply won't happen. But district chiefs won't have a free rein. Already district chiefs have told the union, they have been told by their regional managers that they are not allowed to make any comment that's adverse to this report. They are to toe the line, and they will be told what staffing levels they will be getting.
Roger Estill, are you being heavy-handed with these people?
No, certainly not. The period of consultation is exactly what it says. Anyone may make any comment during the consultation period. I hope they will. We've always had regard to consultation in the past. We will do so now. I want to make the point, however, about this legal minimum. It is the Fire Service Commission's job to set standards. The standards that were documented in 1988, which were based on wartime standards, were set by the Fire Service Commission. The Fire Service Commission, on the advice of its national commander, has changed those standards to actually improve standards, because in the new standards we have to get there in 90% of cases in 7 minutes. The current standard says 8 minutes in 85%
so you're getting there quicker.
Cases. Yes, indeed.
You've got 1,575 staff there. You've told them, go away, you're all fired, you've got to reapply for your jobs. What's it going to do to morale?
I think that over the next few days, of course, this will be a big shock to our firefighters. We're encouraging them to read the information. Everyone's been provided with the same information. I'd encourage them to talk to their district chiefs. They can certainly talk to the union. They can do anything they want to do to get the information they need. We've set up a centre that will answer fax inquiries in confidence. It's important that people take time to read the whole thing and understand it.
Derek Best, legal action from the firefighters?
Well, this is a very, very fundamental point. If it is that an employer can simply sack 1,600 workers because they don't like their employment contracts and then make them reapply for their own jobs on new terms and conditions, then why have an employment contract? An employment contract for any worker in this country, your employment contract is worth nothing. If the employer can simply rip it up and say, we're sacking you, you can reapply for your own job on new terms and conditions of employment, then really the sanctity of contract, and that's what this is about, is gone and completely out the window. And we don't think however bad the Employment Contract Act is that the Employment Contracts Act says.
So you're talking about legal action.
Contract up.
You're talking about legal action. You've obviously
absolutely.
you've taken legal advice, Mr. Estill, on what you're doing about.
Everything we're doing is, of course, within the law. The point I make, however, no one's going to be applying for their job. We don't want the jobs that are being done at present done. It is not solving the problem. They'll be applying for entirely new jobs. They will have to demonstrate skill sets, aptitudes and a willingness to deal with this. We had a firefighter in Dunedin this week when they were asked, the crew was assigned to do some fire prevention work, said, I didn't join the fire service to do paperwork. Well, that's fine, and I understand that, but I'm sorry, we need paperwork and a lot of other sort of work done as well, and that's what the new jobs are about.
Roger Estill, Derek Best, thank you both for your time this morning.
Fighting fire with fire.
Angry, bordering on devastated, I think, yesterday, getting angrier by the moment, and that's why we're here.
Anger also in Wellington after news that this Central City station is earmarked for sale and these firefighters could lose their jobs.
I feel pretty gutted, really. I've been through a lot, my family's been through a lot, and now we're just going through what I can see is the end of everything.
Well, after 25 years, it might be the end of the road.
The Commission wants fewer firefighters to be paid up to 30% more to do a broader range of work.
You'll still see a red fire truck, you'll still see men on it. But when it affects you personally, you'll then know that what we're saying has been true.
3 years ago, Barry Murphy was one of 8 firefighters who saved lives at a cafe fire.
We rescued 10 people from the 3rd floor of this building here, which was densely smoke alive. Anything less manpower than that, I suspect that we would never have had the chance to have rescued all those people.
Firefighters say they won't give up easily.
Won't be serving the public by walking out on them, straight away like this. I mean, we're still responsible, even though our bosses aren't. We'll still be trying to provide the best service we can.
The Firefighters Union says offers of help and free legal advice have been pouring in all day, with calls of support coming from as far away as Australia. Emma Hart, One Network News.
Around 70 frontline officers gathered with messages claiming planned cuts will endanger lives.
Fire service cut. We don't want the firefighters and the public to be put at risk.
I explained why the changes need to happen if we're going to reduce the number of fires and the consequences of fires. I think actually a lot of staff privately understand that.
Roger Estill says there's still a full consultation process to be completed.
It's been a month of protest.
Jack must go! Jack must go!
All 1,600 firefighters are to be sacked next month and told to reapply for fewer jobs. Fire boss Roger Estill today admitting to One Network News 400 jobs will be lost in the restructuring. New Zealand First is now against the mass layoffs.
That is a concern to me. If people were laid off without redundancy in the fire service, I'd be very concerned.
A senior New Zealand First MP has described the sacking of all firefighters as a scam to break their union. The MP, who won't be named, says Fire Service Minister Jack Elder is now the only New Zealand First MP supporting it.
I guess he must be a lonely man. I think he really does need to sit down and work out, why he's in there in Parliament.
Jack Elder won't be interviewed but admits to some unease in the party caucus at the industrial process. Jenny Shipley says that won't stop the changes.
The restructuring will go ahead, and I think it's quite proper for caucuses to comment that they want it to be done carefully and with people to be considered. But change is required, and that change will continue.
New Zealand First MPs are unhappy firefighters aren't being offered redundancies before the sackings. Roger Estill says all firefighters who lose their jobs will be paid redundancy. New Zealand First insiders claim one MP is even threatening to resign over the issue. Sources say Jack Elder will be asked at next week's caucus meeting to stop the sackings. Duncan Garner, One Network News.
Students out supporting firefighters. Now a claim of a jack-up to put Roger Estill in the top fire service job so he can bring about big changes.
If this contention of mine is correct, that there is the suspicion, then in order to achieve these objectives, a number of senior members of the management of the fire service needed to be forced out of their employment.
Maury Cummings and National Fire Commander Bob Bailey no longer with the fire service. They left 8 months ago, claiming new chairman Roger Estill made their jobs untenable. Both men object to Mr Estill's plans for the service, like reducing the number of firefighters on a fire engine from 4 to 3.
If an appliance arrives on the incident ground with only 3 people initially, then there is considerable risk to the people that may be involved in that building. There's certainly considerable risk to the firefighters.
Firefighters agree. They claim the 3 crew trucks will go to residential fires, while 4-man crews will be retained for inner-city fires.
That reflects the fact of, again, of the business roundtable type influence where Roger Estill comes from.
In turn, fire bosses accuse their staff of self-interest. Fire Service Chairman Roger Estill has been under sustained attack from MPs in Parliament and at a Select Committee inquiry. He says he'll use his right of reply to answer the allegations. Lee Pearson, One Network News.
And Roger Estill's just arrived. We're just getting him kitted up in the studio so he can hear what's being said in Wellington. So Roger Estill is with us. And now we start, though, tonight with one of his attackers. This is the Alliance List MP and former firefighter himself, Grant Gillan. Good evening.
Good evening, Paul.
You've been attacking this man now for 3 weeks in the Parliament. Let's have the evidence of wrongdoing. Facts, evidence, please, Mr Gillan.
What we have here, Paul, is a situation where the Fox is now in charge of the hen house. There's $900 million missing, $900 million of fire levies missing, and this has been missing through a series of schemes that have been set up by some of the large insurance brokers of New Zealand.
Right, what do you mean missing? You mean, what do you mean, the books have been cooked?
There are schemes that have been set up so that large companies of New Zealand can avoid paying their fire levies to the tune of $900 million over the last 6 years.
You mean they've avoided paying levies, or they've had some kind of structure in place where they could pay a lesser levy? Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's both. Some of the schemes are totally illegal, some of them are unethical, others need to be tested in court.
Right, so are you accusing Mr Estill of being involved in illegality? Is that what you're doing, Mr Gillan?
According to the Crown Law Office opinion, Marsh & McLennan, a company which Roger Estill was a director of and is actually currently employed by as a part-time job while he's still chairman of the Fire Service Commission, was involved in setting up schemes which the Crown Law Office have determined as being illegal and may be used to commission a fraud on the public in New Zealand and the Fire Service Commission.
Are you saying that Mr Estill has been involved in illegality? Is that what you're saying? That's what I want to know.
Yes, the issue here, Paul...
Not insinuation, Grant. Not insinuation and theory, fact.
The issue is there's $900 million missing and the prosecutions have not taken place. Mr Estill, when he was set up as the chairman of the Fire Service Commission, the new commission stopped the audits of these major companies. The prosecutions haven't taken place. We know the money's missing. We know the schemes are illegal. And why haven't the prosecutions taken place?
Do you want to come in now on this? Just a moment, Grant, please. Do you want to come in now, Roger Estill, on this, or do you want to wait till I come to you in just a couple of minutes?
No, you go ahead. I feel the damage is increasing as he speaks, actually.
All right. Are you joining Trevor Mallard, Grant, in alleging his qualifications are false?
I have a different opinion to Mr Mallard on that.
What is that opinion, please?
There is a technical difference as to whether Mr Estill is determined as a fire engineer or whether he is not. But that's not the real issue, Paul. That's
no, excuse me, it's one of them. It's one of them because he's been accused in the Parliament, Grant, of misleading a select committee, misleading everybody on his qualifications. Mr Estill is saying that he qualified, that he's never been part of any half-assed correspondence course in the United States and that he dropped out, as Mr Mallard alleges. He claims he was qualified in the UK back in 1973. Do you dispute that? That he qualified as a fire engineer, do you dispute it?
I have never entered that debate, Paul. My concern is with regards to the lack of prosecutions over $900 million. If that fire levy had been paid, we would not be looking at 1,600 firefighters being sacked now, and the householders of New Zealand would get a 35% reduction
but presumably,
in their fire levy.
Just a moment, though. I mean, it's not unusual for the gamekeeper, for the poacher to turn gamekeeper. I mean, if that's what Mr Estill was doing at Marsh McLennan, have you got any evidence to suggest he's colluding, collaborating with any firms, anybody, in getting out of their fire levy since he has been chairman of the Fire Service Commission? Yes or no?
Since he's been chairman of the Fire Service Commission, the audits of those companies have been stopped and the prosecutions have not commenced.
Are you saying he has
I'm
alleged...
asking that
No.
the audits be commenced and the prosecutions be commenced as well.
Are
There's
you
a lot of
suggesting...
money
I want to
missing
know,
here.
excuse me, you've been attacking this fella for 3 weeks and now you're nationwide on television and you're very brave, Mr Gillen, to stand up in the House of Parliament where you have full protection. You say here tonight that he's been colluding. I invite you. You say that Mr Estill has been, or affirm your belief that Mr Estill's been colluding with parties who want not to pay all of their fire service levy since he's been chairman of the Fire Service Commission. Here's your opportunity. Do you say it or do you not?
The firm that Mr Estill was a director of...
Do you say it, Mr Gillen, or do you not? Anybody can stand in the Parliament and say it. Is that what you are saying?
Paul, what I've been saying in Parliament is because Parliament is the place where these issues are debated. I'm here tonight to talk about the issues that surround a large amount of money that has been missing from the people of New Zealand, and all I have been doing is asking that Mr Estill commences the audits and also commences the prosecutions of the large companies of New Zealand that have avoided paying those levies.
Yes, we understand that. Now, can you go, please, just quickly to the question of whether you are accusing him of having exercised or abused conflict of interest since he became chairman of the Fire Service? Just yes or no, please.
I believe that Mr Estill's position as chairman of the Fire Service is a conflict of interest when we look at his current occupation as a managing consultant of Marsh McLennan and a past director of Marsh McLennan.
That's not the question. The question is, has he abused his position since he became chairman of the Fire Service Commission? Yes or no?
Well, I can't answer the question as to whether
Good,
he's
thank you very
abused his
much, Grant
position.
Gillen, for your time. Let me go now to Roger Estill. Have you misled? First of all, the matter of the 900 million. Your comment on that?
I have no idea where Mr Gillen gets that number, Paul. Last week I think he said the number was 150 million. I think it's important to understand that at the time I was asked to take on this job, I said that on matters relating around the issue of levy, I might well have a conflict of interest in some respects. And so I told the Minister that if I was to take it on, I'd want to declare that interest and take no part in the issue of calculation of levy. And so I have made that declaration from day one. I refresh it any time that there's a matter on the agenda. I withdraw from the meeting. I have no idea, actually, about any of the details. I just do not involve myself in that. And Mr Gillen, interestingly, has, through parliamentary questions, ascertained that several months ago that I have declared an interest on the matter. The Deputy Chairman of the Commission...
Yes, all right, but Roger, with respect, what about the 900 million? I mean, are there large sums of money missing because firms have managed not to pay their levy? And have you deliberately failed to follow up the non-payment of such levies?
I have personally taken no part whatsoever in the Commission's responsibilities to make sure that levy is paid properly.
Why not?
Well, because I declared an interest in those matters, because of the possibility that I might learn something.
Well, wouldn't it assuage any concerns about conflict of interest if you were to get onto it smartly?
Well, just so far as I'm concerned, you can't have it both ways. In terms of what the Commission has done, however, they have got onto it very smartly. Mr Martin, the Deputy Chairman, said last week at a press conference, and I was present, so that's how I found out about it, because that's the extent of my declaration. He said that right from the outset, he took action to get a Crown Law opinion as to whether or not these various proposals or methods of calculating levy were legal or not, whether there were two ways of reading the Act. The previous Commission had said that there were two ways of interpreting it.
All right, excuse me, Roger, I've got to tighten up just because I've got to cover a bit of territory. Have you obstructed the carrying out of audits since you became Chairman of the Fire Service Commission?
Absolutely not.
Have you consulted the industry in any way since you became Chairman of the Fire Service Commission on how to avoid paying the fire levy?
I have not.
Are there hundreds of millions of dollars, as Mr Gillen says, outstanding by firms who have cheated and not paid their fire service levy?
I do not know. I'd be very surprised if the numbers were anything like that.
Would it be your intention, yes or no, to find out?
No, I think it would be improper for me personally to find out, but the Deputy Chairman is fully cognisant with the whole situation.
It is said the Deputy Chairman is your mate. Nepotism, this is the accusation.
Well, the interesting thing is I had never met him until the day that we were both appointed. Oh, I was appointed before him. The day he was appointed, that's when I met him.
Have you misled people about your qualifications?
Absolutely not. I've always made clear exactly what my qualifications were. I think I had to submit them at the time I was asked.
Did you start a correspondence course in the States in fire engineering and then drop out?
No.
Did you qualify in the UK at the Institute of Fire Engineers in 1973?
Yes, I did.
Were you made, have you got the documentation to show this?
I don't have it with me. I'll be happy to send it to you. Yeah, definitely.
You've got it, and they made you an honorary fellow in 1993?
Yes, both certificates are hanging on the wall.
Right, that's the British qualification.
Yes.
Do you want the fire service privatised?
No.
Have you said ever in the past you want the fire service privatised?
No, I have never said that.
In connection with your qualifications, it's alleged by Trevor Mallard that you told an Internal Affairs Select Committee that you had an American qualification. Did you?
No.
All right. Let me just ask you just a couple of questions. Where's my little bit of paper gone? A couple of questions, really, about your meeting with New Zealand First the other day. Did anything change after your meeting with New Zealand First?
Well, we undertook that we wouldn't discuss the outcome of what we did. What the Commission is doing is it's going ahead with the consultation process, and today we released some further details about it.
OK, but is there voluntary redundancy for those who don't wish to reapply?
We've indicated to the union today how we see our undertaking to treat people fairly who choose not to reply. Previously, we just said intention is to treat fairly. Today, we put some numbers on it.
I thank you very much indeed for your time, Roger Estill. Grant Gillen, thank you very much for your time as well.
Thank you, Paul.
They burned an effigy of Internal Affairs Minister Jack Elder while he met local police bosses at the Central Police Station.
Some people, I think, are very upset about this whole issue and are going to extreme lengths.
Meantime, firefighters from Invercargill and Dunedin left the south today, making their way to Wellington to join Thursday's march on Parliament.
About 120 firefighters marched to Jack Elder's office, voicing their anger over a likely 20% cut to the service. The march was also aimed at gathering support from the public.
Roger Estill hasn't managed to tell us that come the 1st of July or whatever date the implementation takes place, who's actually going to stop the fires. I mean, there'll be a quarter less staff to fight them, but who's actually going to stop them?
A national day of action is planned for Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch in 2 weeks.
Oh, dumbfounded. I can't believe it.
Not surprised either.
Reaction from the 2 Dunedin firefighters sacked at today's disciplinary hearing. Complaints against 3 firefighters were lodged by the Fire Commission Chairman Roger Estill, the target of last week's noisy protest on the streets of Dunedin. One of those fired, Mike Meaden, is seen here demanding answers from the head of the Fire Commission.
Tell them that you care about their safety. You tell them now that you care about their safety.
Well, I do.
3 of them.
Mr Estill claimed he was the subject of threatening and intimidatory behaviour. Late this afternoon, the firemen were told they'd been sacked.
The actions that they took on the day in question were fairly intimidatory. They were not in keeping with what we consider to be good order of the fire service, and clearly we were disappointed with those actions.
Although they are sacking 2 individuals, they are effectively sacking the firefighters of New Zealand.
Both firefighters say they still have the support of their colleagues.
One thing it will do, it will strengthen the resolve of firefighters.
I don't think there was anything done over the top. I think we were expressing ourselves the way we felt.
The 2 sacked firefighters plan to appeal their dismissal and have 14 days to do so. Hamish Clark, One Network News.
For 28 years, Barry Ritchie spent his days out fighting fires. Today he's home, planning how to fight his dismissal.
I can't believe that this has happened. I don't know why it's happened. And in my opinion, I've done nothing that constitutes a sacking.
He's one of 2 firemen sacked yesterday after a complaint by Fire Commission boss Roger Estill, the target of last week's noisy protest.
Look at these men, Mr Estill. Look at these men. Tell them that you care about their safety. You tell them now that you care about their safety.
Well, I do.
3 of them.
The firefighters' union says the sackings are unacceptable.
They're quite outrageous, they're totally unjustifiable, and we won't be accepting them. We'll be certainly following the legal channels to appeal these sackings as soon as possible.
The fire service, however, says the men were out of line.
The actions that they took on the day in question were fairly intimidatory. They were not in keeping with what we consider to be good order of the fire service.
But the union has today hinted that there may be more protests in support of the sacked men.
There was an immediate upswelling of support for these firefighters from other firemen who just want to say, we don't want to work in this fire service, we want to walk off the job. So we've got a lot of efforts to keep the fire service going.
Barry Ritchie says he's now got even more time on his hands to fight the fire service reforms. Zara Potts, One Network News.
So did the fire service, or did the firemen deserve the sack? Did they deserve it? With us is the Deputy Chairman of the Fire Service Commission, Doug Martin, and from the Firefighters Union, Derek Best. Why should the Fire Service Commissioner have to put up with that, Derek? I mean, it was intimidating, it was done for the cameras, it was extremely physically aggressive, it was threatening. Why should he have to put up with that?
Well, I think the essential argument that you've raised is, do they deserve to get the sack? You've got Barry, 29 years service to the Dunedin community, Mike, 25 years service to the Dunedin community. They've had commendations. The question that the public have to ask is, whatever did they do, and let the public make their judgment on that, do they deserve to lose their jobs, their careers destroyed, their families destroyed, because they put their case
directly? Well, I don't think the families are
necessarily
necessarily destroyed. Can you answer the question I asked you, though, Derek, which is, why should the Fire Service Commissioner have to put up with that? That kind of humiliation, Derek?
Well, firefighters have had to put up with a lot of humiliation. They've had a great deal of violence perpetrated on them. People seem to think they can hide in Wellington, make these decisions that destroy people's lives and are not accountable. The first time those Dunedin firefighters had a chance to put their case to Roger Estill, and it was the only chance they had, and they put it as vigorously as they could. Now, they may have put it too vigorously, but how many of us, how many of your viewers out there would have loved the chance to put their argument to people who have closed their hospitals, closed their fire service, closed their schools?
See, very good. These are very good points, Doug Martin. You better answer these. You see, why the instant sacking? Why react like this? These are difficult times. I mean, you are conducting radical reforms in the fire service. Of course they're going to be explosive, for God's sake, when they run into Roger Estill. Why instant sacking?
Well, Paul, when people assault the chairman of the Fire Service Commission, verbally abuse him, use terms like F, scum, and murderer and liar, the notion that you'll get away with that and somehow is just bizarre. And I think the action that's been taken by the fire region manager is entirely appropriate in the circumstances.
Yeah, but where were the written warnings? Where was the process here? Where were the procedures?
Well, there are some misdemeanours that are of such a serious nature as to justify summary dismissal. Now,
what, going home when there's a fire would sound like one in the fire service. You know, going home, not turning up when there's a fire, not telling the Fire Service Commissioner what you think of him when he's fired every bloody one of you.
Yes, well, I mean,
would be misconduct, wouldn't it?
Using that sort of language and essentially assaulting the chairman of the Fire Service Commission, I doubt that any employee in any workplace would get away with that, Paul.
So no redundancy, nothing, Doug. No redundancy, nothing.
Yes, I mean, the two people concerned can appeal their decision through the Employment Tribunal through the ordinary processes. But certainly, if you're dismissed for misconduct, no redundancy. You know, people, I mean, I'm sure many people around the country are sympathising with Derek Best tonight, saying these fellows are suddenly, their livelihood's gone. What about their families? What about the process during turbulent times when they might have got a bit frothy? Well, turbulent times may be, but they step well over the mark in this case, in my view, Paul. And sure, it might seem harsh in the circumstances, but I'm very satisfied that the Fire Region Manager has made the right decision in this case.
Might seem harsh in the circumstances?
No, I don't think it's harsh at all.
Not harsh?
Oh, Doug Martin's a very brave man sitting in Wellington as well, aren't we? They're all big, brave boys until they have to actually front up and be accountable for their decisions. These comments of Doug Martin with the comments that firemen made, there's no evidence to establish that at all. If there was an assault, who deals with assaults in this country? The police. That's an appropriate place for that. They don't have the gumption to go to the police and deal with it on that basis. This is just ridiculous. We're not talking about people overstepping the mark, doing something wrong and getting disciplined. We're talking about people with 29, 25 years service getting the sack by people themselves who have brought the fire service absolutely, totally into disrepute in this country.
Or is this not one particular incident at all? The fire service, Derek, is of the view that some of the firefighters in Dunedin have been particularly stroppy with the new management. The new management's been trying to show leadership, trying to make change, trying to do things, and that perhaps this really is just everything coming to a head, what happened the other day.
Well, no, you can't hang somebody for someone else's
Maybe someone's got to show some leadership here and show who runs the fire service.
Oh, I'm sure that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to show that they're tough and strong and they're very hard up here in Wellington. But no, you're talking about individuals. Everyone has to be treated as individuals. They have an entitlement to that with the service they've given to the community. They're entitled to have their case heard on its merits, and it simply wasn't heard on its merits.
One complaint, Doug Martin.
And who from?
And who from?
One complaint?
Yeah.
Well,
there was one complaint about this.
Well, as a matter of fact, what the chairman of the commission did was record the events as he experienced them. And that it doesn't make happy reading, I'd have to say.
The chairman also told the news media straight afterwards these men are entitled to make a protest.
Oh, absolutely, but they stepped well over the mark. I mean, there's ways
no, hang on,
of
he said that after they had apparently stepped over the mark. These men are entitled to make a protest.
Yes, and he arrived back in Wellington very shaken by that experience, very shaken by it.
See, that's it again, Derek. You know what I mean? It's physically, it was like assaulting Derek. I mean, it was violent, and there it was humiliating him for this man doing a very difficult job for all the country to see, all set up for the news media.
Well, I think what you're doing is explaining that there are, or telling us that there are issues to this that need to be looked at. Where is Mr Estill's complaint? Why didn't he front up and give that evidence? He never told us what his problems were. Mr Martins actually said he didn't make a complaint, so now we've got a situation where no one complained about the firefighters' actions, although he was deeply concerned. There are proper processes. People are entitled to be treated with respect. And we're not talking about ordinary people here. We're talking about firefighters with over 25 years' service, commendations. They deserve to have their case heard fairly. They may deserve discipline. They may. I'm not saying they don't. That has to be inquired into. But to lose their jobs, summary dismissal, no notice, on the say-so of one man, the chairman of the commission, who has told the regional manager what to do, it's outrageous.
Might that be an area back for these fellows? Is there any going back, Doug Martin? Some kind of disciplining, perhaps an apology?
Well, no, I mean, the decisions have been made. I mean,
no going back at all.
Let me just explain one thing. I mean, Mr Estill recorded the experiences that he suffered for the chief executive, and the chief executive basically made those judgments and decisions, and that's entirely appropriate.
So no going back at all, no compromise on this. You're fighting a very big fight. You're fighting a very big fight. You're trying to reform the fire service, and you're going to buy this fight, Doug.
Those decisions have been made.
You're going to buy into this one.
The employees concerned can appeal through the ordinary processes.
Well, can it bring their jobs back, Derek?
We certainly will try. I've never heard so many different stories. Mr Martin's just told us now the chief executive made the decision. The regional manager in Dunedin said he made the decision after hearing the evidence of the people yesterday. I guess these things will be very interesting, and they will be inquired into at the Employment Tribunal. There's just too many lies being told.
But should there be a way back?
Oh, absolutely. I think the people involved, there are issues to be worked through. I understand the two individuals have actually made a public apology if it was perceived they went over the top. But they've got issues they want to deal with, and we want them to deal with them as well. You've got to recognise the circumstances that this happened within. It's
exactly.
Not just,
the circumstances are very big circumstances, just finally, Doug Martin. I mean, the whole fire service really is up in the air. People are uncertain about their job futures. People have got families. People have done service. Of course, for heaven's sake, they're going to be angry at the Fire Service Commissioner. You've got to give them a bit of slack, Doug, don't you?
Well, it doesn't warrant that sort of behaviour, Paul. Here at the end of story.
I thank you very much, Doug Martin, for your time. Derek Best, I thank you very much for your time.
And in Auckland, 2 firefighters have escaped disciplinary action after they were seen at community meetings over the weekend. The fire service had issued an order forbidding political or industrial meetings on station. The men were philosophical after today's meeting with management.
Did you fear when you might lose your job?
There was that possibility, but it didn't come to that.
Initially it started off as a let's hang a firefighter, and it hasn't worked out quite that way simply because of the pressure that's been put on them from various sources.
The fire service says it won't discuss staff matters in public.
The fire service has been dealt a major blow. In an employment court ruling released 2 hours ago, the decision has stalled restructuring. Chief Judge Goddard says, on the findings that I have made, the defendant, the fire service, did not comport itself as a fair and reasonable employer, let alone as a good or ethical one. In the end, the defendant is shown to be an employer that has deliberately breached its employment contract obligations. Firefighters were enraged in May when the fire service said that it would make 1,500 firefighters apply for 300 fewer jobs.
Lives have been put in danger straight away by Mr Estill and his band of merry men.
Weeks of employment court hearings followed, the firefighters' union claiming the service didn't consult with them over the restructuring. Today, at a briefing after the release of the judgment, the fire service was also claiming victory.
One of the most critical judgments is that we should continue to adopt a fair process, particularly with respect to moving the required staffing levels. So the ruling from the Employment Court is actually a positive affirmation of the Fire Service's planned modernisation program.
Union head Derek Best says the judgment is a clear win for the union.
There's 1,600 firefighters and their families who will be able to have a first decent night's sleep for quite a few months after getting this decision. They can't be sacked. The Commission have been found to have acted illegally. They will have injunctions issued against them and are facing the prospect of damages. Our concerns have been absolutely vindicated.
Derek Best says the year-long fight has cost members around $250,000 and damages will be sought. Emma Hart, One Network News. The fire service has been dealt a major blow. In an employment court ruling released late this afternoon, the decision has stalled restructuring. In the lengthy ruling, Chief Judge Goddard says, "On the findings that I have made, the defendant, the fire service, did not comport itself as a fair and reasonable employer, let alone as a good or ethical one. In the end, the defendant shown to be an employer that has shown to deliberately breach its employment contract obligations." Firefighters were enraged in May when the fire service said that it would make 1,500 firefighters apply for 300 fewer jobs.
I feel pretty gutted, really. I've been through a lot, my family's been through a lot, and now we're just going through what I can see is the end of everything.
You got a job at the moment?
I don't think so. I don't think I've got a job at all now.
Weeks of employment court hearings followed, the firefighters' union claiming the service didn't consult with them over the restructuring.
To take the whole judgment in context.
Today at a briefing after the judgment release, the fire service was also claiming victory.
One of the most critical judgments is that we should continue to adopt a fair process, particularly with respect to moving the required staffing levels. So the ruling from the employment court is actually a positive affirmation of the fire service's planned modernisation program.
Union head Derek Best says the judgment is a clear win for the union.
There's 1,600 firefighters and their families who will be able to have a first decent night's sleep for quite a few months after getting this decision. They can't be sacked. The Commission have been found to have acted illegally. They will have injunctions issued against them and are facing the prospect of damages. Our concerns have been absolutely vindicated.
He says the year-long battle has cost members around $250,000 and damages will be sought. Emma Hart, One Network News.
Collecting. Yes.
The country's firefighters back at work, their jobs safe, but for how long?
Of course there'll be lost jobs. I mean, believe that they just want to get this through at whatever cost.
They're not going to change their tune. They're just going to try and sweeten up the deal a little bit, I should say.
Doug Martin's one of those responsible for the fire service shake-up. He says they'll appeal the ruling that stopped the restructuring.
The modernisation of the fire service will absolutely go ahead, no doubt about that at all.
And that means job losses.
We won't need as many paid staff, and we've been quite upfront about that all along.
All 1,500 firefighters were told in May they'd have to reapply for 300 fewer jobs. The fire service wanted the changes by July. Clearly, that's long gone, and now the service is under judges' orders to negotiate with firefighters, however long that takes.
And we're certainly going to take heed for the Chief Judge's comments.
They can restructure, but they have to do it properly and lawfully, and the law sets in place proper processes.
Firefighters say the decision affects all workers. It says the fire service must negotiate with firefighters collectively. Firefighters claim the service refused to deal with their union.
They can't come through here and slash and burn us. We've proved that, and the workers in New Zealand now have got to stand up for themselves a bit more.
And a warning for employers.
Some companies may need to look at the way in which they do things.
Opposition parties want Fire Service Chairman Roger Estill sacked. They say the court ruling proves he and other commissioners are out of their depth. But Roger Estill's refusing to go, and the government says there's no reason to dismiss him. Duncan Garner, One Network News.
Firefighters, most firefighters are a bit strange. You know, they have to be a bit strange to run into places people are running out of, and there isn't a lot of glamour. There's no glamour coming out of a building. Snot pouring down your nose, to put it crudely, and your face black, dragging some half-burnt kid out of it. It's not fun. I'm from a small village in Liverpool, or near Liverpool, called Mells, which had about a 30,000 population. Semi-rural. Born there in 1942, lived there till we emigrated to New Zealand in 1972. Nobody ever sacked firemen. When I came to New Zealand, We're still the same. I was running 8 stations at the time. Now I run 1 watch on 1. 60-odd men before, 9 now. I'm not a pommy whinger. I've only been involved in union circles for about the last 8 years. There are no union stirrers in the firefighters' union. There are none. All they're doing is sticking up for their own rights and the rights of the people of New Zealand, who they're there to protect. It's a strange thing. I always used to vote National until about 1984, and then I made the mistake of voting Roger Douglas in. I can't understand the economic vision that says sacking people is good for the economy. It's just criminal, you know, because firefighting is a numbers game. The only way you put fires out is to have plenty of people there.
Leave him! Hey, miss!
I bumble about round here, walk around, look at my cows, play with the dogs. If I wasn't a fireman, I'd be a farmer. I was a farmer when I left school. I could never have had a place like this, 10-acre block in England. Just couldn't have afforded it. This whole thing about clients and stakeholders just annoys me intensely. You know, we don't have clients and we don't have stakeholders. We have people that we help, and that's the end of it. You can't have an emergency service run as a business. You can have it run efficiently and cost effectively, but certainly not to make a profit.
Taupo firefighters on the job today and relieved they'll all be back on Monday.
I can really feel for the married guys, you know, with families who have lived here all their lives, you know, who suddenly have been told, oh no, you've got to move out of town.
The firefighters' jobs are among 100 positions nationwide earmarked to go by mid-year. Taupo's 14 firefighters say they were told 8 of them would lose their jobs starting next week.
It's definitely unsettling. It's unsettling for our wives, our children.
But any layoffs are now on hold after firefighters won an interim injunction in the employment court. Chief Judge Tom Goddard saying, I have found established to the level of an arguable case. The union's claims the fire service was contractually obliged to consult with the union over the proposals, but in breach of that contract refused to do so.
Oh, absolutely a victory for the firefighters and the union, but as I say, more a victory for the ordinary people in New Zealand, because they will be safer than what they would have been if the cuts had gone ahead.
Last October, the same judge overruled plans to sack the country's 1,500 firefighters and force them to reapply for their jobs. Both the Fire Service and its Minister Jack Elder are refusing interviews. Through spokespeople, the Fire Service says it's disappointed. Minister Jack Elder says any delay in restructuring could cost lives. The union and the Fire Service meet back in court to argue their claims next month. Charlotte Glennie, One Network News.
On the job today, these firefighters have been bracing themselves for mass job losses. Now it appears most are safe.
Very heartening to see that perhaps that we've reached an agreement.
I think it's good for the fire service, the morale of the fire service.
The fire service had planned to sack all 1,600 firefighters and make them reapply for 350 fewer jobs. The employment court ruled last October the fire service couldn't do that. One Network News has now been told an agreement's been reached between the fire service and the union. It's a compromise which will mean far fewer firefighters lose their jobs. We're told fewer than 100 firefighters will go. But the deal must be signed off by Fire Service Commissioner Roger Restel. All along, he and his commissioners have argued for big cuts.
We don't need as many paid staff, and we've been quite upfront about that all along.
Now we're told Mr Restel, who's not talking today, doesn't agree with the compromise proposal for fewer job losses.
Mr Estel appears to be an obstacle to the resolution of this dispute. He has to go.
Let's just hope he's big enough to back down.
If we are waiting on Roger Estel, I think he should front up.
Fire Service Minister Jack Elder says it's not yet a done deal, but it's up to the Fire Service Commission. Roger Estel's been at the centre of controversy since his plans for layoffs were first released. Now it seems only he has the power to end the dispute. Duncan Garner, One Network News.
Sweeties.
Thumbs up for the new deal. One Network News understands all 1,600 firefighters are being offered a 5% pay rise, almost $50 a week extra. Less than 100 firefighters will get the sack, fewer than originally planned. In all, the deal's expected to cost almost $10 million. But for that to go ahead, it needs Fire Commission Chief Roger Estill to agree. Still not talking, Roger Estill's confirmed he's not yet satisfied. His main concerns that firefighters will be used effectively, that the deal is value for money, and that it allows the reform agenda to go ahead. Mr. Estill wants fewer firefighters doing more public duties. It's understood there's nothing in the new deal that guarantees that. So the stalemate continues, the government supporting Roger Estill.
If the chairman of an organisation as responsible as the Fire Service Commission didn't have the ability to have some say and some input, there would be something wrong with the level of accountability.
It's understood lawyers are now involved in resolving the dispute. Duncan Garner, One Network News. Into the Beehive, Solicitor General John McGrath to advise the government on whether it can sack Roger Estill. Earlier, the Fire Commission boss emerging from a meeting, his plan for restructuring knocked back by the government. One Network News understands Roger Estill's proposal rejected because it didn't line up with a deal already negotiated by Fire Service Chief Executive Jean Martin. It's also understood his plan didn't have the support of Mrs Martin and Fire Service managers. Mr Estill's now been told to go back and get them on side. His deadline, Tuesday.
It would be wrong to say that it was rejected. It was received by us and we are seeking further information on it.
The delays are set back for the government. Earlier this week, Jenny Shipley said she wanted to have the dispute resolved by today. Roger Estill tonight appears isolated, his ability to modernise the fire service and keep his job on the line. Roger Estill now has until Tuesday to save his job. The government sought further legal advice on how it can deal with Mr Estill if he fails to come back next week with a deal. By seeking that advice, the government seems to be taking care to ensure its next move isn't costly and doesn't backfire. Duncan Garner, One Network News.
News long overdue at Wellington Central.
Well, it's about time. It's taken a long time, and I think we've been vindicated in our stance against Mr Estill up to now.
He had some sort of one-man crusade, which only he and a few other people on the Commission seemed to think was right. As I say, they didn't have the support of the firefighters.
Roger Estill's decision preempts this committee's report. For months it's been grilling him and the Fire Commission, hearing allegations he had a conflict of interest, an Audit Office report detailing the Commission's deteriorating financial management since Mr Estill took over, and it heard of big spending on public relations and lawyers.
Have some water, please.
The committee's report was due last week. The deadline extended for Mr Estill to respond. One Network News understands it's highly critical of him. That report will be released on Friday. But tonight's resignation supersedes that.
I'm delighted that it's happened. It's a chance to restore public confidence. But the government that stood by him has got to now wipe a huge amount of egg off its face.
I'm quite sure that the country will end up being safer as a result of Mr Estill going.
In trouble from the start, Roger Estill was made Fire Commissioner to overhaul the fire service. He wanted fewer firefighters and more emphasis on fire prevention. The government always backed him, till now. The turning point in this long-running saga was the Select Committee's report. 4 of the committee's 8 members are government MPs. Yet in the committee's report, all of the MPs have turned against him. If Roger Estill hadn't resigned, the government could no longer back him. So tonight's move is a face-saver. Roger Estill goes and the government is not forced to sack him. Linda Clark, One Network News.
Roger Estill walking away, but not empty-handed.
I think it's a reasonable recognition that to do this job, my life got pretty turned upside down. I had to burn quite a lot of bridges to undertake it. And I don't know what the right number is, but I think it's reasonable.
Jenny Shipley accepting the resignation and supporting the controversial $68,000 payout.
He has succeeded extensively, and I think he deserves recognition for it. I wouldn't hesitate to see that this man gets an ex gratia payment.
The turning point in this saga, this Select Committee's report. It's understood all 8 MPs have turned against Mr Estill, grilling the Fire Commissioner for months. They heard allegations of a conflict of interest and an Audit Office report detailing the Commission's deteriorating financial management under Roger Estill and big spending on lawyers and public relations.
Neither I nor the other commissioners had ever done anything improper or wrong. What we had tried to do was change the fire service, and anyone who's ever tried that in the past knows that is a perilous path if it means you're going to be changing the cushy lifestyle of the D1 firefighters.
Down at Wellington Central, no sympathy.
Well, it's about time.
He had some sort of one-man crusade.
We've argued that this appointment was wrong. Every New Zealander knows it was wrong. Finally, Mr Elder and his colleagues woke up to that fact yesterday.
The government had hoped by accepting Roger Estill's resignation this row would be over, but by paying him $68,000, the fire continues to rage. And this afternoon in Parliament, Jenny Shipley can expect a grilling. Duncan Garner, One Network News.
Roger Estill walking away, but not empty-handed.
I think it's a reasonable recognition that to do this job, my life got pretty turned upside down. I had to burn quite a lot of bridges to undertake it, and I don't know what the right number is, but I think it's reasonable.
Opposition MPs don't think it's $68,000 well spent.
I do not welcome the fact that they paid $68,000, I believe, of taxpayers' money to encourage him to go. That is wrong.
Roger Estill has done a good job in the public interest. When he offered to resign, the government reluctantly accepted that resignation, but were determined to make an ex gratia payment in recognition of the abuse and the public pressure that he has been put under by a very narrowly focused group of people who are mainly in this House.
Roger Estill resigned late last night after months of criticism, after repeatedly saying he wouldn't go. The Prime Minister remains his strongest defender.
It was just the pure frustration of constantly being abused by members on the other side of the House while he tried to get on and make New Zealand a safer place.
Jenny Shipley calls Mr Estill's critics union lackeys. Both Labour and the Alliance have firefighter union leaders standing as candidates in the election. But Roger Estill's critics are not just on the opposition benches. Remember, the Audit Office damned his financial management, and on Friday a select committee which includes 4 government MPs will publish a report highly critical of him. Many in Parliament believe he was pushed.
Mr Estill was told that either you go and take the cash or you stay and we fire you.
This saintly man, this paragon of virtue, this man of unequalled knowledge about fire matters in this country, somehow found it all too much. I don't believe that for one moment.
Jenny Shipley insists Roger Estill wanted to go, that the payout is legal and justified. Yet coming on the heels of that other big payout to former members of the Tourism Board, it is bound to cause the government grief. Linda Clark, One Network News.
Mike Meaden was sacked for this protest against Roger Estill. He later got his job back, today reacting to Mr Estill's resignation.
His vision of the fire service was not one that was shared by firefighters throughout New Zealand.
Overdue news too down at Wellington Central.
I reckon it's great. Hopefully we can get somebody a bit more responsible in there now. Someone that'll look after the country.
I opened up a bottle of Drambuie and thought, well, yep, I'll have a couple of drams of this, and it was good, actually. Yeah, a relief.
Yet despite accepting Mr Estill's resignation, Jack Elder's still supporting him.
We are the envy of the world because of the work of men like Mr Estill over many years. The sort of personal attack that he's been subjected to is quite extraordinary.
Yet some claim Jack Elder should go too.
The buck stops and the bungling started with that Minister of Internal Affairs. He's responsible and he must walk today.
Jack Elder should be gone. He should be gone.
Mr Elder says he won't go and the restructuring must continue.
I'm a parent. Lots of members of parliament on this side are parents. We are not prepared to see children continue to die in fires when they don't need to. We know that we can save more children from dying in fires.
Yet the pressure remains in this dispute. Some MPs now calling for an inquiry into the way Jack Elder's officials have handled this row. So far, they've escaped untainted. Duncan Garner, One Network News. Jean Martin here on the left, the Fire Service Chief Executive for almost a year. Today resigning, saying the trauma of the last 6 months must now be put aside so that the Fire Service can move forward. But One Network News has been told Jean Martin didn't walk empty-handed. It's understood she was paid around $30,000 to go. Her resignation comes a week after Fire Commission boss Roger Estill left with $68,000. He was replaced by Social Welfare Head Margaret Baisley, who is today not talking. Mrs Baisley last week given free rein to shake up the fire service.
I think that this was part of a package deal. If Estill goes, Martin follows. I think that's what ministers have been working on for weeks.
A shaky year for Mrs Martin. She fell out with Roger Estill after failing to agree on the plans for restructuring. Her resignation understood to have been in the planning since late last week.
I received a press statement in my caucus this morning. I have no further comment on that.
Jenny Shipley last week supported the payout to Roger Estill, but no such support for this latest handout.
Mr Speaker, the member is fully aware that any payments made to any employed person by a Quango is solely the matter for the responsible board.
Opposition parties say the payments are unwarranted. Coming on top of the Tourism Board handouts, some claim they set an expensive precedent. Meanwhile, Margaret Baisley today met with the Firefighters Union. Formal talks to resolve the row are expected to begin within days. Duncan Garner, One Network News.
Volunteer and paid firefighters work alongside each other all over the country, but animosity is building between the two groups in some areas, especially Taupo.
Well, it's not a happy relationship. I mean, they don't have barbecues at each other's houses, and that's simply because the volunteers are there to take the jobs of the paid professional firefighters.
The row escalated after the fire service boss sent out an internal memo. Dame Margaret Baisley accused some firefighters of threatening others and their families. Dame Margaret says she's shocked and appalled with this cowardly and unlawful conduct, and she slams it as despicable, unacceptable and unlawful. And she says in her 35 years in the public service, she has never seen this level of intimidation. Dame Margaret wouldn't comment today. She says it's an internal memo and she won't debate it in the media. The Professional Firefighters Union says the memo is wildly inaccurate. But volunteers say they are being intimidated and their equipment, such as torches and boots, are being tampered with.
You go right around anywhere in the country and ask the volunteers what's happening. This is not the only station, but this would be the worst one.
2 days after the memo was sent out, security cameras were installed at Taupo Fire Station after claims of sabotage.
We are trying to ascertain or identify exactly how that has occurred, whether it has been done internally or externally.
The Firefighters Union doesn't believe its members are responsible and claims the security cameras have been put in to undermine paid staff so they can be replaced by volunteers. It says if there is any tampering going on, the police should be called in. Carolyn Weston, One Network News.
In other news, paid firefighters are threatening to strike over the Millennium celebration unless they get more money. Their union's seeking triple time over 4 days. They also want incentives to be on call or for working out of town. The union claims volunteers will receive special compensation, the fire service paying $10 per hour to the Volunteers Social Fund.
What we're asking for is not much different than what we understand the fire service have already agreed to pay to volunteers.
But the fire service says firefighters' contracts require them to work on New Year's Eve without extra pay.
Firefighters are out on the job today and happy to be there. After 16 long months arguing with bosses over restructuring, the Court of Appeal has unanimously brought plans for change to a grinding halt.
First time the firefighters have had smiles on their face for a long time.
It's actually a good victory for the firefighters, but more importantly, it's a victory for the average worker of New Zealand.
In June 1998, the Fire Service Commission announced a massive overhaul of the fire service, including redundancies. The union won that battle in the Employment Court. Today, that's been reinforced by the Court of Appeal.
It closes that particular chapter, and it has caused, those restructuring proposals did cause some uncertainty for our staff.
The Court of Appeal, I mean, literally threw the Commission's argument out, and that really does beg the question of accountability. Why did the Commission pursue a course that quite obviously was wrong?
Well, you can stick your job up your ass.
Restructuring was always unpopular. Firefighters were suspended. Bosses Roger Estill and Jean Martin resigned, together with estimated $100,000 golden handshakes. The Fire Service Commission now has to pay $186,000 worth of the union's legal bill, also its own.
Thousands and thousands of dollars have been wasted in this industrial dispute, where it would have been far better used on other issues, such as fire prevention.
Going to court is, it's not anyone's first choice, I don't think, but I think we probably had to do that to get to where we've got to today.
The Commission is claiming some success. The Court of Appeal's backing firefighters being more flexible in carrying out routine fire prevention duties. That's always been a sticking point. Now firefighters say they'll go along with it. Charlotte Glennie, One Network News.